Hi, and welcome back to our next session, Drive Patient Adherence Through Innovative Tools and Technologies. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Hal Walsh, CEO of SymmetryRx. Welcome, Hal.
There are those who go the distance, and there are those who reach well beyond. What is it that separates one from the other? Call it an inherent obsession to outperform. Call it extreme expectation. Call it genius. We call them the overreachers, the rare and often unsung doers who reach farther and have the power to propel one company ahead of others. They're embedded in every vertical of our industry. At the research bench, in manufacturing, in marketing, and you'll find them working through all the possibilities to get trial medication where it needs to be, in patients' hands. People with insights who are hastening the future. At SymmetryRx, making compliance foundational coexists with a restless instinct to challenge the status quo. Our mission is, and will always be, to shorten the time and distance between pharma, physician, and patient, to narrow the adherence gap, to overcome barriers caused by rep and patient access issues to the practice location, to innovate and deliver trial medication programs to all 50 states, and to create an entire ecosystem of trial medication solutions with all the known benefits, to see what others don't see. This is how we reach farther, distance ourselves from the crowd, and bring vision and leadership to effect change. Who are the beneficiaries? Pharma, where healthy revenues fuel discovery. Physicians, who want to contribute to patient health using new technology. And patients, who simply desire a better way to receive the medication they need. There will always be overreachers in our industry. People who by nature are reaching farther, expecting and causing the future to arrive ahead of schedule.
Hi, my name is Hal Walsh, and I'm the CEO of SymmetryRx. And just by way of background, I've got 35 years in the healthcare sector, primarily on the commercialization side of things, heavy experience in vitro diagnostics, in pharmaceuticals, and in medical devices. I hope you enjoyed that video when we were asked to put together a video for this event. I thought about the last Digital Pharma event I went to and how just impressed I was with the speakers and with the attendees and with the overall organization. And that video is really dedicated to that audience today. And we have learned a lot through our association with Digital Pharma, and we hope to make some contributions here today. SymmetryRx develops platforms to advance medication adherence, and that is primarily through demand generation for trial medication is what we do. And I'll move on into that next thing. So we've gotten quite a bit of background from other speakers at this meeting, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time repeating things that you know, but the shift to virtual selling is certainly real. Digital ordering's been going on for a number of years, all big stuff, important to what we are doing. The folks attending this meeting have been major drivers of that in the healthcare sector and just doing some amazing work. I often hear people say they're not happy with where we're at, and that's a good sign because we should never be happy with where we're at, but I think a proper reflection of what the various companies have done, both the pharma manufacturers and the supporting companies have accomplished is pretty impressive. Of note and of importance to SymmetryRx is convenience is growing in importance, where 41% of patients prefer home delivery of prescriptions. That is important to us, and obviously you saw from that video, we built an entire service around it. And we still have the ongoing issue where 30% of patients never start their prescriptions, and up to 60% discontinue medications within the first 6 months. I will share with you, depending on therapeutic class, those numbers are way overstated. Certain therapeutic classes, you are under 50% first fill and even higher drop-off rates. So I wanted to share this, and I don't know if you've seen this elsewhere. Accenture, of course, is widely referenced for the great work that they do. But they took a look at companies that really continued to bring better technology and digital solutions to their constituents, internal and external. And what Accenture came to learn is that those companies doing it are really leading growth of their overall businesses. And I don't remember the speaker yesterday, but I love what she said. She said, I think she was heading a digital office for their company. And she said, my dream, I know I'm successful when this office doesn't exist. And it's so embedded in how we do things as a business that this office calling it out isn't necessary. And I thought that was an absolutely brilliant insight. At any rate, what Accenture is teaching us and showing us is that for going back to 2015, and they segmented it by time ranges, 2015 to 2018, companies committed to technology and digital solutions in that time range had 2x the growth rate of what Accenture called the laggards, those people not as engaged. You always have a chance to engage, and many of the firms here have. In the period of 2018 to 2021, the gap grew. It was then a 5x gap in the growth of the companies for those companies committed to digital solutions. And you can see their forecast moving forward, that the gap just gets wider and wider. And it's really remarkable. We look at these numbers, but many of the folks here, whether in their present position or prior positions, we've been working on this for more than a decade. And we've made tremendous inroads. And certainly the companies we support tend to be the leaders. And I think that would be true for many of the other speakers and from the other side of things. So every service that SymmetryRx creates, all of our platforms that we create, they meet the regulatory, management, and ease of use requirements of our constituents. They're all PDMA and HIPAA compliant systems as needed. And as a baseline, I think that that's relatively well assumed today. We've been vetted many, many times over the years by the manufacturing community through all sorts of testing and risk assessments, MLR reviews, et cetera, et cetera. And we're quite proud of the work that we do. We're just completing a 2-year project of upgrading our technologies to .NET 4.8 and 5, and that will have significant advances. So I think we're just within months of completing. It's like 90-something+% done, and it's going to really help us as we accelerate our development, as we have done over the last 2 years. Over the last 2 years, we've released more new technology than we had as an organization in probably the prior 10 years. And that was my commitment to the people who supported us taking over this business, and we're doing it. Oops. So SymmetryRx's Rx Sample Center is our flagship platform, and it is a premier HCP destination for multi-manufacturer sample requests. And this service in a one-stop shop kind of mode has tremendous impact and significance for the prescribers that use it. Of course, it is based, it's on the web, but it is mobile ready for both tablet and phones. And what our tens of thousands of prescribers tell us is that this system really meets a critical need for them in that the consistency of their drug sample supply is very important to them. And when I started working in this business about 14 years ago, we just heard it all the time. And I think what sometimes gets lost is that the drug samples are thought of as promotional items. And yes, they are meant to promote trial medication use and medication adherence. That is true. But from a prescriber's point of view, it's part of how they practice medicine. If they offer drug samples, it is part of how they practice medicine. And I would encourage you to let that seep in so that when they have supply issues there, it's taking them out of their flow. And if you think about that prescriber patient interaction, that place where they come to agreement, and the official term for it is concordance, where they come to concordance about the treatment plan, patients understanding about how and when to take the medication, covering financial issues of the medication. A lot of that happens at the point of the drug sample being dispensed by the prescriber to the patient. And for those of you who may not be aware of this, many people are aware of the statistic, but they're not the statistic, but the fact, but not how big of a statistic it is. 30% of patients will only fill a prescription if they receive a drug sample, and that is regardless of age, income, or gender. It is a big part of starting the patient on their journey to medication adherence. And that number hasn't changed. That number has been repeated in at least two different studies, and I believe there's a third that I can't quite seem to put my hands on, but I believe it's out there. So sample medication, trial medication is very important to that patient journey. So the SymmetryRx platform, we're kind of creating a little bit of a juxtaposition here, and I'll make sense of it for you. The traditional direct-to-patient supply chain for drug samples is really organized around sales rep activity, pharma rep activity, which makes sense. That today is still where most drug sample demand is generated, is through those teams. And the educational services that they provide about proper use of that medication, and the as a place to find resources to help patients with affordability issues that they might have. Increasingly, those reps are focused on those top 3 deciles of prescribers for a particular brand, and it leaves a lot of open space. We participate in all deciles. We participate. SymmetryRx's sample center is available. Pardon me. I saw a question. I'm not ready to get to that yet, so I'm going to take a look at that later. But it was a great question. So what we do is what we have done is we've tried to create an ecosphere of a digital sample supply network. And we do today, while we do have paper in some of our transactions, that is by choice of the physician. All of our entire systems are digitized now. And we start at the top of this by saying intelligent reach and single point contract and execution. So our model is fairly unique in that we manage the contracting with the pharma, we manage the technical integrations with the allocation systems, eligibility, listing, et cetera, and data integrations with the sample fulfillment house. And we own all of that. We own all the legal work, all the connection work, all the MLR for content about particular brands. We manage all of that. And then we have a channel network that is both non-personal promotion and personal promotion that promote the service, essentially. So they're not getting into any type of detailing of the brand whatsoever. And that's very effective, cost efficient, and for the manufacturers and for the channels that we work with, it really goes over well. We provide the manufacturers digital control by tying into their allocation system so that that's managed at a global basis by the manufacturer. And we offer something called smart targeting. And I'll tell a little bit of a story around this one. So we've begun investing more and more in data licenses, looking at the individual prescriber habits. And in one example, you can have a drug in a therapeutic class, and we can have a target list of 170,000 prescribers. And we go and look at the database and we say, how many prescribers have prescribed a branded drug? So not getting into the generics, a branded drug in that therapeutic class. And what's interesting about that is there might be 300,000. So you've got a white space of 130,000 docs where you're spending marketing money educating them, but you're not getting the reward because you're not offering them samples. And we have an extremely inexpensive model for doing that. And then I'm going to move on, and I'm going to skip over the utilities because I'll cover that actually in the next slide. We are very customer centric. Since we took over this business, our reviews from our clients and our channels have gone up significantly. We're very focused. We've added a lot of support staff to make sure things are done in far exceeding time expectations. We get them done quickly. And with that, I'm gonna move on. So we're covering all deciles, all ownership structures, et cetera, with our services. And we also have. Well, let me get into the utilities. It's the next slide. So we white label. Actually, this is what I was going to say. We white label these sites. We do it for manufacturers. We've done it probably 25 plus times, whether for a brand, whether for a therapeutic class by a manufacturer or an enterprise for a manufacturer, and they use our technology. And we've really positioned ourselves uniquely as developing the utilities for this sample request generation and demand. And some of those utilities are, of course, the white labeling of the site itself, which was the roots of this business. But we also now have an authenticated e-signature. And so if a prescriber authenticates himself within our system, that authentication, which allows them to use e-signature, goes across all of our sampling platforms. And in that way, we're utility, because while the prescriber could do it more than once, we don't torture our end users. We try and think of ways that ease their journey with us, no matter where they connect with us, on which site they connect with us. And most recently, and really as a result of a survey that was completed June 17th last year, we took out all of our priorities for the years and we built direct ship to patient. And it is a fully digital transaction for the prescriber, and the fulfillment house, the ADR, can decide whether they want to receive all that information digitally or whether they want to receive it as a PDF, whether electronic or otherwise. But we can flow the data right into their production system for pick, pack, and ship. And we also, utility-wise, we own the business associate agreement with the covered entity, and that crosses all of our platforms as well. So once that's in place, it goes across all of our platforms, which saves a huge hassle. And all these utilities, we're staking out that position. We're staking out the position of we want to be part of the tide that raises all ships. And I know that so many folks attending this meeting fall into that category. But we're doing it. We're very intentional about it. We're really intentional that we create services and tools to make winners out of everybody. And we'll talk more about Sample Coordinator in a minute. So how does it work? I mean, what's the effect? We're in the enviable position of being able to see transactions in pharma branded sites as well as our own industry closet multi-manufacturer site. And of course, most manufacturer transactions come through their sales rep, and to what degree they drive folks to their sites is based on needs, right? But with a smaller manufacturer, 4 brands, small target list, we did 28x the number of transactions on our industry closet as they did on their own site. And then for a much larger relationship for us, 10 brands, very large target list, really market covering target list, we still did 3x. They did 30,000 transactions in a year, SRFs, and we did 100,000. And so it makes a difference, and we can support all of that activity so you guys can the manufacturers can focus their time in the educational and support services that they deliver best. And I something that is correct. Okay, so the direct ship to patient is a critical service. We did 2 major surveys on it, one that completed last September and one that just completed January 31st this year. We learned a ton. There's no prescriber out there that thinks that patient encounters through telemedicine is going away, and that 41% of their patient encounters by telemedicine, they believe, would naturally result in a trial medication recommendation. Or that they would want to get that sample to the patient. And we're empowering that activity today in a global way. And we're using the existing infrastructure. We're creating the sample request all electronically, and that is fulfilled through the manufacturer's fulfillment partner. And I talked about the business associate agreement already. Coming out in Q4 this year, we actually have 2 things, but I'll talk about this one. Coming out in Q4 this year is a platform called Sample Coordinator. And what this is really exciting because we're able to manage the samples in a practice and all the allocations for all the prescribers in the practice for those companies that are contracted with us. And once you get 3+ prescribers in a practice, so including the NPs and PAs, it really is a management activity at the practice, and it's a little bit sometimes hard for them, and they end up with too much or too little inventory. And this platform will streamline that whole process in a PDMA compliant way. I think the only thing I would add there, this is also all digital. So the SDP is all digital. Sample Coordinator will be all digital. I think we're well into our trend. The other service coming out in Q4 will be all digital as well. And it's so efficient. When we first released electronic signature, for instance, our first manufacturing partner on that was watching the clocks, if you will. And what did they do? They timed from the time the rep sent the form digitally to the prescriber to when it ended up in the fulfillment house, and that time was 18 seconds. Needless to say, they were pretty well pleased with that. The other data that I want to show with you is some meaningful statistics about your business. So we did 2 studies, different brands. I think they're different manufacturers. And where the design of the study was coordinated between the eSample team and the manufacturer, and one for a popular migraine medication. And this has control groups and all the things that you would expect. It showed that total RXs increased by 13.1% for prescribers using our services. And on another mature primary care brand, and the operative being mature, we had growth in NRXs, this was a different brand, et cetera, of 10 to 15%. And the reason there's a range there, a range there is they were very smart, and they segmented the study by the number of units that were allocated to the prescriber. So the reason there's a range is we know based on the number of units what drove the most NRXs, and that was a very interesting study that we did. Those 2 teams did, and we also are just sharing. This Reboot Tool. So at the height of the pandemic, when there was no rep access to practice, we had just released e-signature. We looked like geniuses. We were just building something we'd been working on for 2 years, and it happened to come out at exactly the right time. and that is our Radius XP, and that is a remote drug sampling request platform, and that is used by field reps and inside reps. And we would love to have showed a video on that, but time doesn't allow. But the journey of creating a sample request is about 1 minute from logging on to completing it. And then lastly, just a couple quotes from the survey that completed last June 17th. SymmetryRx understands the space. They're innovative, driven, flexible to customer needs, and that's from a director of pharma operations. And we are driven, and we're friendly, and we're easy to do business with, and we find that right balance in there. But we really are driven to meet customer requirements and innovate in order to do that. And then lastly, an editor-in-chief for a leading pharma magazine has said we're the Lexus of the industry, plugged in, enormous benefit to pharma companies. And with that, Andrea, if we can go to questions, that would be great.
Absolutely. We already have a lot of great questions so far. So if you guys have more questions, please feel free to add them in the Q&A tab. So to start off, one of our audience members says, awesome insights. Separate from the sample ecosystem, have you observed any demonstrable benefit to approaching patients with content during the point of care stream, the doctor's office, versus approaching them with adherence-focused content during the actual therapy stream, for example, electronically after therapy has begun?
So we are always looking at different ways to impact medication adherence. And I'm often heard saying everything we do is about medication adherence. And I recently read a study on that, and it showed significant medication adherence. I can't remember the exact stat today off the top of my head, but it's significant for sending patient educational materials. And you can send them by mail, you can send them electronically. And the particular juxtaposition of that was a 30-minute pharmacist call versus sending educational materials. The result was the same in terms of medication adherence. So what a great economic way to go. Go ahead, next. I hope I'll get through some of these questions.
All right, our next one is, do you face resistance from HCPs that would rather use a fax-based paper sample form as opposed to logging into sample website? How have you managed that?
So first, our system does allow for faxing. It's still the primary method that we communicate in SRF and that we receive it back. So it is still optional because we have tens of thousands of doctors a month ordering, and we weren't going to just shut it off. But our growth in our e-signature is consistent, and it is growing. But you were looking at at the current pace, we're looking at a 2+ year cycle that will probably be accelerated with our e-signature only services.
That's great. So next question, what if the doctor receives samples of the generic brand for branded generics? What will allow the doctor to choose your brand?
So I'm not that aware of sampling generic brands. The problem for the person who makes that investment is that they don't know they're getting the order. So if they're doing in-office dispensing, you might see that. And I think that it holds equally true. In fact, I know that it holds equally true about medication adherence and that 30% of patients that will fill the prescription because they receive that sample. So little complexities.
I think our last question was referring to something earlier on in your presentation, but one of our audience members wants to know if one of the drivers behind what you're doing is because of cost. Can you speak to that a little bit?
The drivers behind what we're doing is because of cost. I truly don't understand the question.
I'm sorry, I think it was referring to something earlier on in the presentation, so there's not a lot of context.
So let's just talk about cost for a second. So our revenue to expense ratios are often 50 to 1. And for customers that use our services fully in the ways that we would give them suggestions about, they're in control of it, it gets even a lot better than that. And it's hard to get a lot better than 50 to 1, but we in fact do it. And we work through the details with the marketing teams and the sample operations teams on that.
That's great. So last question, sort of speed round for you. Someone is wondering what the key strength of SymmetryRx is compared to other digital sampling platforms or applications.
Um, this is embarrassing to say, but I don't spend a lot of time looking at other applications. We are so driven by our vision of digitizing and being fully electronic
Mhm.
and creating utilities for the industry that anybody can tap into these. Anybody can participate in them. There's a lot of different organization types that we've partnered with in the past and that we're partnered with today. And we just continue to be the best at what we do, trying to be the best. I don't want to be arrogant about it. We keep trying to be the best at what we do. And what we have coming out, we actually have services coming out I haven't talked about today that we believe will extend the life of drug sampling as the primary promotional and medication adherence tactic. We believe it will extend it by another 3 to 5 years.
Wow, that's great. Well, we can't wait to see what you guys do next. That is for sure. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, thank you all so much. Join us for our next presentation in just a short 5 minutes on navigating rapid innovation in healthcare, physicians' inside takes. See you there.